to be on.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to the Awareness Task Force meeting. Just pulling up my agenda here. And my name is Mike Waters and I'm the chair of the Awareness Task Force. I live in Ward 7 and my pronouns are they, them, and I will pass it to Tricarico.
Hi, I'm Tricarico. My pronouns are they, them, and I live in Ward 2, and I'll pass it to Marianne.
Hi, my name is Marianne. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to reveal my ignorance. I don't know what ward I live in, but I do live in Salem and I'm a guest this evening.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Very good. And David, do you want to introduce yourself?
David Reinhold, resident of Polk County, and my pronouns are he or him. And I'll pass it to Linnell.
My name is Linnell, and I don't know my ward anymore, but I'm in Virginia Stapleton's ward, formerly Kara Kaiser. I think that's
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Number one.
And I'm a local advocate, and I'm also the program manager at Safe Sleep United, which is currently the only low barrier women's shelter in Salem.
Awesome. And hi, everybody. I'm Gretchen. I'm staff to the Human Rights Commission and she, her pronouns. Thank you.
Did we have any public comment, Gretchen?
No, none received tonight. Unless our guests would. I know our guests are here to help discuss the student survey, but if there's other things.
I wouldn't mind jumping in with, I don't know if it's just the survey that we could jump in on, but there's a couple of other things I would bring up if it's appropriate.
Yeah.
I've just been listening to our new police chief and some of the summaries about the police report, the draft summary of all the results of the questionnaires they sent out. And everything seems aligned just somehow with some of the stuff you guys have been discussing and some of the things I've heard on other ends about the importance of being able to identify situations, trends, needs. And I was really happy to hear that there's a focus on collecting data and being able to use the data for planning. And in a couple of areas that just really seem important to me, and I hope that it's on the table, would be that we had talked with the Human Rights Committee at one point where I had asked if there could be tracking within the police department of a data field that might identify that if a crime is done, was it done to or by an individual who's homeless? Because we have such a perception that individuals who are homeless are scary, crazy, violent people. And just like sheltered people, some of those individuals can be that, but usually they're struggling with mental health when that happens. But in just anecdotal information, I've heard that unsheltered individuals are way more likely to be the victims of crime instead of the perpetrators of crime. But that's anecdotal. So I really hope that there is a focus on this group as the Human Rights Commission also wanting to be able to identify discrimination, and part of that would be collecting data that kind of tracks those things. So if there's a data field that identifies if a crime was done by or to an individual who's homeless, I think that gives you a better picture, and it gives us better ability to share with the public, hey, of course it's going to happen. Every now and then something bad or dangerous is going to happen. But if you actually look at the numbers, individuals who are homeless are more likely to be the victims of crime instead of the perpetrators. So hoping that that gets tracked. And there's also a new Senate Bill 850, which is it requires that we track deaths of individuals who are homeless, so that when there's a death recorded, it would just indicate whether the person was homeless or not. So those are the things that I hope get tracked data-wise. And then just in kind of tracking some of the legislative bills, I noticed that we have 4 people on the legislative committee: Mayor Bennett, Chris Hoy, Jim Lewis, and Tom Anderson. So we have a lot of like old white guys, and I asked some of the lady city councilors if they wanted to serve or would serve, just to reflect the diversity values that we have. And Virginia Stapleton had said she asked, but the committee itself has a certain number of people it can have and certain terms they fill, and it wasn't time for that. And I hope that there's a path for either increasing the number of people who can serve or asking some of the more senior people to step down if there's not going to be some terms expiring soon, so that that committee could have more diversity to reflect the very goals that so many of us are talking about in our own groups and at the city level. So those are the other things I kind of have like wishes for, in addition to the survey stuff. And then just also wondering if anything has gone anywhere with your guys' discussion about homelessness as a protected class, knowing that was some research you were doing and just didn't know. Everybody's been buried, so maybe there's no progress on that, but just if there is, or how I could help. So that's it. And thank you.
Thank you, Linnell. It's always so great to have you. I think all of those issues are really good issues for the broader commission to discuss. And I wonder, Gretchen, if those are captured in your notes, maybe we could bring that forward then to the full commission as a discussion that happened within awareness. I don't know that any of them are pertaining particularly to our task force, so I don't know if
Thank you.
addressing tonight, but I want to make sure the commission hears them because I think they're all really good. I hadn't heard any of the results of the police survey, and I love your cat.
He's very suddenly. Sorry.
I hadn't heard any of the results of that, and I don't know if that was maybe at the HRC meeting that I missed or if it's going to be at the next one, but I'm looking
We
forward.
had a meeting with the NAACP where they discussed some of the results. I didn't catch all of it. But my grasping of that was them coming to terms with the fact that their data collection is lacking and looking at the things they're going to be tracking. So now is a really great time to be offering those suggestions. And I do hope that not only will you offer that to us, but offer that to SPD themselves as well. You know, we don't have a lot of say over what they do, and we can certainly support you in that. But I would absolutely send those suggestions to them as well, because I agree. And we were actually just talking about this when I was talking to Gretchen about our recommendations. And when I was talking about our equity lens of, yeah, data is really important. One of the things that we will be proposing in our equity lens is there's several actually that talk about data and how important they are and making sure that everyone is included. So there's an element of that that definitely ties into what you're talking about, but I would love to see you bring that more specifically forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Our next agenda item is the minutes. Did everybody get a chance, or more specifically, David and Tricarico get a chance to take a look at last meeting's minutes? And does anybody, would anybody like to move to approve those minutes?
I can make a motion to approve those.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, I don't think any of us are opposed. Great, thank you. And now we go to the meat of our agenda. We're going to talk about communications plan development, but I think because Linnell and Marianne are here, I would like us to keep the communications plan portion of it pretty short so that we can spend most of our time in the meeting talking about the survey. We talked last time about the video, and I had offered to go off and try to draft something for the video, but then Gretchen clarified that the original person who volunteered to do the video for us, even though they didn't want to do the video, they still were fine with their draft being used for the video. So I think the question is, it's probably for me and Gretchen to go back to CCTV and talk about how that script might get turned into a video absent the original participant, right? Gretchen?
Well, actually, CC Media would say that regardless of who's doing it, they would welcome someone taping, and we can either just record the audio or record the visual, depending on the commission's preference. Because they're not yet open to the public, they've got a list of tips for creating a video in one's home. So if someone's willing to basically read the script at home, following these tips, CC Media then can turn it into something that we can post on the webpage and share on social media. And I think you'd be kind of leading in with your introduction and how you're sharing a story that had been shared with us by somebody we worked with, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a volunteer to basically do that and record that, or you could ask for one at the commission.
Why don't we see if anyone on the commission is interested in doing it? And then if no one is, I'm willing to do it myself. But if somebody feels really moved to do it, it's fine too. That sound all right? Okay, so we have our video one in the hopper. We talked a little bit last time about HRC 101, and we talked even briefly about it at the broader commission. My understanding is that they thought the event went pretty well, but it was very lightly attended. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 1 or 2 people at each event.
Yeah.
So what do we think as an awareness task force? Do we think it's worth trying at that again and seeing if we can get folks? Should maybe we consider I don't know, rebranding it a little bit around what the event is? What do y'all think?
I want to know how long these events are running for.
We posted them at 30 minutes.
Okay.
And we pretty much kept it that. The idea was like, let's be digestible and not too much of an ask. And we pretty much kept to 25 to 35 minutes. I don't remember anything going really off time.
Okay. I mean, I'd like to possibly continue, but maybe we can reevaluate it. I don't know if we need to break it down even further. I mean, that seems like almost, it'd be more of a pain to go to 2 15-minute meetings and 1 30-minute. So I don't know if that's the solution, but maybe, was there an opportunity for people attending to give feedback?
Yeah, with it being so small, it ended up, we did our presentations, but we also just got a chance to talk with the people who did come.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it doing more, but for only having 2 people attend, I don't know that it's worth all the time and energy, you know?
Yeah, and we could advertise again, but say it's a 15-minute thing. That might cause more people to participate. Try it one more time with that and see what happens. That might be an idea.
I wondered what you said that it kind of turned into a conversation with the participants. Did you get any insight from them as to why they decided to come? What interested them, or maybe
it felt pretty straightforward. Curious about the Human Rights Commission, interested in what we were doing, had heard of it but wanted more information. And I remember people being complimentary of the content, like, oh, this is helpful. I see what you're doing. More people, it'd be neat if more people knew about what you were doing. That was the gist of the discussions.
And were we just like emailing partners to get them to come? Was that the main way of inviting people?
Yeah, it went to our overall mailing list, which includes all of the people who've signed up to be on our mailing list, as well as all of those organizations where we have an email address that connect with a variety of identity communities. It was late January and we did one at night and then one over a lunch hour. We did 2 in the week, the last week of January.
I just wonder, the idea of going to 15 minutes is kind of interesting, but I kind of think it's the inertia of getting there is more than the amount of time.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
So I'm just wondering if maybe our invitation had enough in it for the person. Like, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the person receiving the invitation, and did we actually call it HRC 101? Do you remember what we called it in the invitation?
I can't, but that might be a next task because I could reshare what we did by way of the invitation and invite folks to look at that.
I wonder if it's about framing the invitation as around what the benefit will be to the person going, as opposed to, HRC 101 kind of implies we're going to teach you about the Human Rights Commission. I don't know if that's what we called it in the invitation. I can't remember, but I do think that there's something about the inertia of getting the person there, and what is it that compels somebody to be interested in this. And it could very well be that a number of those community partners and people on our mailing list were like, well, I already know what the Human Rights Commission is. So maybe framing it that way even limits the audience a bit. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about is in my field, we tend to have a lot of success with events when they're really pinned to current events or what's currently going on for folks. So I wonder if we were to have a discussion that included some HRC 101, but then even address some of the things that HRC is working on right now, if an event like that in the future. Because I love the idea of connecting community through events with the HRC. And just because this one wasn't super widely attended doesn't mean that it's a bad notion. It's just maybe it wasn't the right approach.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll send it out and invite your reflections on possible edits based on that. It sounds good.
Yeah.
Now at our last meeting, moving on to topic C here, and then I want to get to the survey pretty quick. But topic C ties in because I think we were talking about our next logical email communication is about the survey, letting folks know that it's out there, letting folks in our communities know where the link is for those who are taking it online. So, and then I think I think we still have a desire to kind of move toward that quarterly pace of communications, but I think the survey kind of carries us for a quarter. So I don't know that I have much else to say about email communications tonight, but I wonder if you guys wanted to chat about that more, or maybe table that and get to the survey.
I'm fine with tabling it.
Well, yeah, same, David, you said?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, then let's talk about the survey. Thank you very much to Gretchen. If it was you indeed, Gretchen, who put together the summary of all the discussions that we've had about the survey. That was really helpful to see it from the different meetings. And it's nice to see it in a summary form. I think that the major issues that we uncovered with the survey, especially with Linnell's help, was one, making sure that we have that ability to distribute it. Linnell would have liked more time last time on the survey because collecting the responses by hand it takes quite a bit to do, and pointed out to us that some of the language in the survey we may want to look at it again for readability and grade level. that particularly the definition of discrimination is pretty wordy and uses a lot of long words as well, definition. And then I think the other big theme that we saw from last time was making sure that we had the survey translated at the very least into Spanish, but perhaps into other languages. So building some time in for that. But maybe by way of introduction, Marianne, you could tell us about the class you have coming up and what your timelines are looking at like.
Sure. Great. First of all, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for having me here tonight, and thanks for the collaboration doing this survey. Last year, I felt like it was such a great experience for the students. I felt like the information they were able to bring you was really useful. So, we did one of these versions in 2017 and again in 2020. I feel like the survey that the students put together last year was better. Like the one in 2017 was great, but the one last year was even better. And the students ended with kind of, here's some things we could do even better next time. So I want to say, like, I am very open to how do we continue to make this process better as we go. So if you have ideas, or you thought of this, or you looked at this question or this definition or this language, awesome. Like, bring the suggestions, because I really want it to be improved every time. The class is a Western Oregon master's level class. The students are in the Masters of Organizational Leadership program. It is a spring term class. So we actually have our first class together on Thursday, April 1st. And I was just today working on the syllabus and looking at the students I have registered. What I've heard, we had a faculty meeting a week or two ago, and the faculty who's been working with this cohort of students has nothing but praises to sing about these students. And, last year, they were just so hardworking and so diligent and so committed to doing this well. So I am very optimistic for the term and really looking forward to the process. We did last year have several students in the class who were fluent Spanish speakers, and they translated the survey. So when it first went live, it was available in Spanish. And Qualtrics, that Western Oregon has this fantastic subscription with. So we have an account with all the bells and whistles. We can field this, and we can turn on all the privacy considerations. And it's a really great fielding tool. And Western Oregon has access for the class to it. There's a button where, when you're doing the survey on any given question, you can click to translate it. So anyone who wanted to, as they went through the questionnaire, if they got to a question partway through and they said, oh, I'm not totally clear, I'm understanding this question, at that point, they could just toggle, read it in Spanish and toggle back. So you could go through the whole questionnaire in English, you could go through the whole questionnaire in Spanish, or you could go back and forth between the two languages. And we didn't just use Google Translate. We had like native Spanish speakers who were in the class who translated it. And I actually have an old friend who I worked with in marketing research. And there's certain phrases that marketing researchers use. And I said to him, I speak a little bit of Spanish, but I said, I don't know what those phrases are. Like, do you have a questionnaire or two that's written by a native Spanish speaker who is a very experienced marketing researcher that my students who speak Spanish could have access to, just so they can see, like, when we say it this way in English, this typical way of putting that in a Spanish questionnaire is this way. So I do feel like we were pretty successful with the Spanish translation, but we did not attempt Russian. We did not attempt Marshallese. And I mean, if I look at Salem demographic numbers, there certainly is an argument to include languages besides English and Spanish. And I would be open to that. I personally can't do that, but I'm sure we could work with a translator, figure out how to do that if the commission says, hey, this is really important to us and I don't have budget. So if that's something that would cost money to hire a translator, I would need help. I feel like
I wonder about, on the Spanish question, I didn't know that we had translated into Spanish, and I don't know that we ever advertised that the survey was available in Spanish.
So interestingly, when you opened it, they had all the English instructions and it said, esta encuesta está disponible en español.
Oh,
So
okay.
they noted it's available in Spanish. And we were able to track how many of the 200, I think it was 217 online respondents we had in 2020. And we tracked, and there were actually only 2 of them that took advantage of the Spanish translation. And the students and I had a conversation. I mean, there were 3 of them that worked really diligently on the translation, and they were a little disappointed. They're like, oh, why? Like, we worked so hard on it and not very many people used it. And I think I would really like to make sure that, like, when we post it on Facebook or send the email, that information really highlights that it is available also in Spanish. And I also feel like, if the Facebook page is primarily in English, you may primarily have English speakers who visit it. And so there may be a question just of which eyeballs are accessing things that are primarily available in English. We really wanted the outgo, the way that we distributed the survey and invited people to do it, to be replicable. So we didn't want to send it out to certain groups that then in a year they might not be active, or they might have a very different distribution list. So even though, honestly, as a class, we talked about, are there Spanish speaking groups or a way to reach that community? And we decided not to pursue that because we didn't know that we could distribute it the same way in the future. So this is a question of trade-offs. And if we say, hey, it is more important to us this year to reach broader into more diverse communities, even if that means our sample of respondents is different than last year or might be different than next year, that's the kind of decision that we need to make. And I'm open if you say, if we're going to translate it into Spanish, which I would wholeheartedly recommend, then let's make sure our distribution invites Spanish speakers to do our survey. And if the distribution is different than last year, that's okay. Like, we just would need to decide on our priorities.
That's excellent. Thank you. I think when I think about our goals going into 2021, one of the things that was a little bit of a challenge for us at the end was our pure numbers, that we didn't have enough overall respondents for, particularly for the city's communications team, to be 100% comfortable when we were reporting the results and how we reported those. So in my view, and I would be interested in hearing the other task force members' opinions, going broader is going to serve us better if we can, especially if we can get those numbers up a little bit, and do it in a way that's replicable. I mean, I hear you that we don't want to go broad and then not be able to repeat that next year. So whatever organizations we choose to reach out to, or what other methods we choose to reach out to, have to be ones that we feel relatively competent are available in following years. But David and Tricarico, I'm curious, or Gretchen, you have your hand up.
I thought it might help at this point to tell you one change in the city's strategy is last year, after the survey, but for this year, they launched a Spanish only Facebook page. And with the intention of better reaching this community and audience. And that appears to have tons of momentum, and it's not disappearing. So I think it would be predictably here for us in future years.
That's excellent. The City of Salem Facebook page has thousands of followers. Has the Spanish speaking Facebook page gained some followers and traction?
It has. I wish I could remember how many though, but it has. I've been hearing them talk about the engagement with an excited momentum, but I don't know the numbers. I'm sorry, but I can find out for everybody.
That's fantastic, both for our city and for our survey.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I was going to say to Mike's note, I don't know that on our end we advertised that it was in Spanish. So I think that was a big factor, and we can definitely push harder on that this year. I think my priority is more towards including as many people as possible, just because of what Mike mentioned about not having enough numbers, as well as I mean, in general, I feel like the Spanish speaking community is less likely to access the HRC and to come to us. And I really want to try to encourage them to use us and to come to our meetings and talk about concerns, as well as if we are able to do other languages, to get other folks involved. I don't know if the university itself has translation services that you're allowed to use, if that's something they can do, or if that's considered not part of the university because it's not for the students, it's for people receiving something the students are doing.
I would have to look
Yeah.
into it. I'm not aware of a resource I could tap for a project like this, but I can ask.
Another
Yeah.
thing the city added this year was a translation resource for written material. We had the telephonic, but the written one we were doing, they've got a new resource that expands and increases the efficiency of written translation in a variety of languages. So I could also look into that for
Yeah,
us if we want to
great.
go that route.
Yeah.
We don't have like a Marshallese or Russian Facebook though. So I guess we'd have to talk about the replicability. Like maybe we would say, if we translate it into this language, here are the groups that we send it to maybe, and then we do that. I don't know. I would defer to you all about that, but we could look into the translation if it's usable.
Well, and I would want to make sure before we spend the time, effort, energy, and money to do the translation, I would want to make sure that we have a way to distribute that we feel like it's likely to find people who would would benefit from the translation. So where we have the Spanish speaking Facebook group, I can say, yes, let's translate it to Spanish and distribute it that way, to say, okay, now let's do Russian and Marshallese. Like last year, we did translate into Spanish and then had so few people use it. If we have a way to distribute, then I am all in favor of inviting as much input from as many directions as possible. But I think if we just translate and then it ends there, it doesn't actually end up getting us additional information.
I guess that'll be my next question is, what does distribution look like? Is that only being posted to a website and then we're hoping to attract people? Are we doing any like direct outreach and email? Like, what does that look like and how could we diversify that?
Well, I will take a stab at what we did last year, and Gretchen, you can fill in any gaps for me. We did want it to be replicable. So in 2017, the Willamette students reached out to specific groups, but some of those in 2020 were no longer functioning. And so we said, hey, let's use the city Facebook page. And there was also an email list that you sent it out to. And we said, we're just going to send it that way. We posted. And then like 2 days later, we sent a reminder. So it was an initial invitation and a reminder on the Facebook page and out through an email list. And then we had Linnell's heroic efforts to gather input from people experiencing homelessness. And that was it. When you do surveys, like you spend all this time and effort getting the questionnaire just right, and you want people to do it. But a marketing research survey, it has to be voluntary. It has to be confidential. We want to be ethical. So we can say to people, please do this. We want your opinion, but I can't compel somebody. I can't say you have to do this or this bad thing's going to happen. It needs to be voluntary. And a lot of people don't do it. So I don't want to be annoying, right? Like I don't want to pester someone to post and repost and email and beg. So I usually say we'll do an initial invitation and one reminder, and then we're done. But I do think that if we say we're going to post to the English speaking Facebook group for the city of Salem, the Spanish speaking Facebook group, an email list, I know we have success in the past. If you send an email ahead, like if there's a newsletter that you guys send anyway, and you can have a little blurb like this is coming, or here's something we learned last year, you can kind of lay the stage a little bit to build awareness before you send the survey. I do think that the way we invite and present it and give people a reason to do it helps. But it's always got to be voluntary.
Marianne, I'm curious about, and in just thinking about wanting to make sure that we're encouraging a lot of people to take the survey, but not doing so in a way that biases the results in any way. But we did have a little bit of media coverage of last year's results, and I wondered if we were to kind of try to drum up some coverage, if that would be an okay way to try to get the word out a little bit more
Sure.
around this upcoming survey. That there wouldn't be any concern about, I don't know, skewing the results or anything.
No, I think it's appropriate, especially where this is a survey now we've done in 2017 and 2020 to say, you know, we're getting ready to field our 2021 survey. I think the reality is that this is important. You know, I've done surveys about toothpaste. I don't really care what kind of toothpaste people use, but I really care about our community. And so to say, like, we really value your opinion, we want to understand your experiences. I think it's completely appropriate to build awareness that the survey is coming and to let people know, like, we care about your opinions, we care about your experiences. And yeah, it's going to take 5 minutes to go through and do the survey, but that's valuable. This is important, and it can benefit people around you. So I don't think there's any ethical question about building some media ahead of time. And I don't think there's a concern in my mind about skewing the data. We do, the honest truth is, when you say to somebody, will you do our survey about this? People who are more interested in that topic are more likely to do it. And so if I say we're doing a survey about cell phones, you know, people that are into techie, like, you generally get a higher response rate because everybody cares about cell phones. But if we're doing a survey about socks, I mean, that's not as exciting. So if we say, please do our survey about human rights in Salem, no matter how we position it, no matter what kind of media coverage we drum up ahead of time, people who are more interested in that topic are going to do our survey. So we already have an opt-in effect. People who are willing to do it tend to be more interested in the topic, but we don't create that by building awareness of the survey ahead of time. That's at play no matter what we do.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, you mentioned that you opted not to reach out to some groups because of wanting to be able to replicate. So I guess I'm not quite fully understanding that. So I might need some education there, because I also see this survey as a way to spread awareness about the HRC too. So I guess I'm wondering, like, I mean, this is what I do for a living. I'm that person that emails people and often annoys them. So which I'm offering them a job like 99% of the time. So it's a good thing. But there's a lot of my time is spent figuring out, how do I get into people's inboxes? How do I get there? So I'm curious, like, is there any expansion in that won't harm, you know, your goals for the survey of it being a sound survey?
Sure. I'm going to wear my professor hat for just 1 or 2 points.
Yeah.
So we have to differentiate between marketing and research.
Okay.
And when you actually, if I'm doing a survey to measure awareness, just doing the survey is an opportunity to build awareness, right? Like, I can tell people about HRC and I can tell them the kinds of things you do. And I can tell them, you know, here's all the different activities the HRC does, which ones are important to you. Like, a survey can actually be marketing. If I'm trying to sell toothpaste, I can have you start thinking about different attributes of toothpaste. If I build a survey that the objective of the survey is actually doing marketing, then it's called sugging, for selling under the guise of research, where I say, I want to measure this, but in reality, I'm trying to build awareness or sell or convince you that you really should, because this toothpaste is the best tartar control toothpaste out there. I can put all that information in my survey and then say, don't you care about tartar control? And then suddenly you're like, oh, actually I do. So that, if my goal is to build awareness or sell something or do a marketing activity and I present it like a survey, then that is inappropriate. The reality is every time I do a survey, I am building awareness. I am giving people information that maybe they never considered about the product or service in the survey. And so it's really kind of a question of objectives, and there's rarely a situation. There was a Federal Trade Commission case decades ago where they fined somebody because instead of like sending out to 1,000 people to measure opinions, they sent out to 1 million people. And they said, well, you're not trying to just measure opinions. You're trying to give all these million people this information. And they were fined. But the reality is that nobody ever gets caught doing this. And it's a really gray line between, am I measuring or am I building awareness? I don't question for a moment that we would come anywhere close to that line. I just raise it because when you design your sample and your outgo, we want to design that distribution in a way that reflects our population of our city. And if we only sent it out to a handful of groups that were very focused on certain populations, we could get hundreds of responses, but it wouldn't look like the total city of Salem. And we don't happen to have a list we can use that mirrors the whole every resident of Salem where we could draw a simple random sample. And so last year we said, we're going to use the Facebook group and the email distribution as the closest thing that we have. So what we did was called a population study where we sent out to everybody on that particular list. And we said our sample was the Facebook page and this email distribution list. And we know we can do that distribution again in the same way in the future. I feel like if we say that replicability, there's a kind of sample, we call it a convenience sample, where we say, I'm just going to ask people to do my survey that's like the most convenient for me. And it's kind of looked down on because I just end up asking my friends, asking my mom, asking my neighbor. And yeah, I could probably, get to 100 people, but what does it mean if it's just the 100 most convenient people for me to ask? I do feel like in this situation, if we say we have relationships with groups in Salem that care about this, and we want to hear from their members, we want to measure awareness among their members, then I feel like that's a legitimate way to go forward. The trick is that I feel like it's a trade-off, because if we're specifically reaching out to groups who care the most about human rights, I have a hard time arguing that the results we get will be reflective of the entire city of Salem. I also recognize that when I post an invitation on Facebook, the people who are most likely to do that are the Facebook followers who are interested in human rights. So I don't know how far it moves the needle for me, but I do feel like there's a little bit of a trade-off in terms of, like, this is a sample, the best that we have that replicates we're inviting the city of Salem. And if we specifically outreach to groups who have heightened awareness, increased engagement with the topic of human rights, they're going to have things to say that are a little different than the average Salemite.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
Sure. Yeah. I saw Linnell with a hand.
Linnell's had her hand for a bit, so let's hear from you, Linnell.
So if I'm just thinking out loud with some of the conversations you guys have just had and thinking out loud just from the past, it seems to me like if there was like a vision, like what's in it for me, if without going to add like a whole bunch of stuff as far as disclaimers and narratives, but if it was like the Human Rights Commission wants in every individual in Salem to feel like their voice and their needs matter. And this survey will help identify where some of those gaps are. Please take the survey. Maybe that kind of frames it in terms of why should I do this? Facebook pages are really challenging for people who are living in poverty and survival mode. So I would suggest reaching out to partner agencies and I think that, you know, in doing the survey with individuals who were unsheltered, it ripples to people who are just in poverty but aren't unsheltered. It ripples to people who are illiterate or have cognitive disabilities. And to me, those individuals are all the people that we marginalize the most and the people that are most likely to be discriminated against. So I feel like Facebook outreach gets the people that are at a certain income level and a certain comfort level where you have the luxury to sit and hang out on Facebook instead of figuring out where your next meal is and who's going to watch your kids as you go to your third job. So reaching out to people that serve people who are marginalized. So of course, there's all the homeless service providers, anybody who serves people who are in the BIPOC population, people who provide benefits, TANF, SNAP, Social Security benefits. Those are individuals that are coming to an agency because they don't have the means to make ends meet. So making sure that those agencies are in the loop and have the time to try to figure out ways to help their clients complete the survey. And then, you know, just thinking about illiteracy was way huger than I expected. So agencies that maybe have after school programs, or well, that kind of changes the subject, but people who are struggling because they can't make ends meet and somebody's watching their kids. So those agencies that might be helping people learn how to read, all of those places. And then just like talking about warming centers and how do people get more volunteers. One of the ideas that was offered was every single person involved would just have their own email footer that says, you know, hey, you know, I work for Arches and we have warming centers and we need volunteers. What if everybody who's involved in this has a footer on your email that says, you know, the Human Rights Commission is conducting a survey about discrimination. Our goal is to have everybody feel like their voice and their needs are known and mattered. Here's a survey link, or here's how you could get a print copy of the survey. Neighborhood associations would get the people who have the luxury to attend a neighborhood association. But there's so many people who don't have the luxury of going to these meetings and having Facebook. So trying to find ways to connect to partners that would be able to help get it out and the why does it matter to do this? And then just one of the barriers that came up was whether somebody's living in poverty, survival mode, unsheltered, illiterate, cognitive, asking them, you know, have you been discriminated against was practically useless. Because partly some people didn't really even know what discrimination was, and the definition makes sense to me. But for individuals that are at the lower literacy levels and living in poverty and survival mode, even the definition was too confusing to them. And yet I didn't want to lead, you know, well, has this ever happened to you? Has that ever happened to you? But sometimes I had to kind of give an example of what that would be. So if there was a way for the survey to say, you know, this is a discrimination survey, I'd almost put the definitions at the end, because the people who know what discrimination is don't need to read the description, and the people who don't know are going to get confused by the description. But if you had examples, like, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were excluded because you were low income? Because it's not just homelessness, it's low income, it's poverty. Have you felt excluded? Have you felt like nobody would wait on you at a store because you don't have clean clothes? Have you had people just ignore you because you're in a store in line and they're helping everyone else but you? Have you ever had a complaint about the police, but you were too scared to submit it because they're not going to do anything anyway, is what you thought? Have you had anybody, you know, behind you in line at a store see you using your SNAP card and tell you to get a job? These are the things that are happening to people every day, but sometimes they don't know that that's discrimination, and sometimes it's become such a part of the fabric of their life that it doesn't even seem abnormal. That's just what life is. So if the survey could kind of include some kinds of examples so that people have something to, you know, people would tell me, no, I never get discriminated against. And then the car's driving by throwing things at them. It's like, excuse me? So I think some tangible examples would make a big difference, and having an email footer and every document that goes out from the city would say, do you know, we have a survey out there with adequate lead time for partner agencies and advocates to get the word out there and help their people to complete it. And it just feels like the people who are most likely to be discriminated against are going to have the hardest time accessing this. So if you can make it accessible by examples, accessible by definitions at the end, and accessible by people having the support and warning to be able to know it exists and have the help to get it done from the people who are most likely to be discriminated against. I think that's it.
Thank you so much. I feel like, you actually sat with the survey and sat with people and worked with them to kind of help them understand and market. So I just really appreciate the input. I felt like you had really great input around distribution and really great input about actually what we put in the survey and how we word it and present it. And I feel like in terms of distribution, as I'm kind of thinking through the comments that are swirling, if we just put it on Facebook and send it out to the email list that we have, I think that we can kind of from an academic standpoint say, like, we know who we invited and we invited this whole list and that was our sample, but it's not an inclusive sample. And I feel like what I'm hearing from you guys and what I know about the HRC, like, inclusivity is your top priority. So if we say to be as inclusive as we can, that actually ends up being a convenient sample, so be it. Like, I think that's probably more valuable than saying we want to have this academic, we use this sample that we can replicate. And Linnell, you have so many great ideas. I'm like, oh yes, I started taking notes. Like, we just in terms of your energy for distribution and your ideas and your brainstorm, and like, yeah, okay, let's do it. But I feel like part of what I'm hearing is, let's get this survey written and then give ourselves a little bit more time. Last year, we didn't have a big window because the way I had written the syllabus, I wanted the students to kind of go through the whole process from A to Z. And a lot of surveys that I do, like, you send the email out and then 48 hours later, you send the reminder out. And if people see it and they're going to do it, they pretty much do it right away. And 2 days later, 3 days later, it's gone. If you didn't get them right there at the beginning, you're not going to get their feedback. But in this situation where we're working with partner agencies and they might support other people to complete it, I think to build a timeline that gives more time to complete it makes a lot of sense. And so I've just been kind of spinning on how do I build the time into my class to do that? And I think I can. I already have ideas. I came into tonight with a little bit of a timeline that I can adjust, and I want to revisit it. But I feel like one of my priorities is to have enough time with the questionnaire and field that we can use partner agencies. I saw a lot of head nods around the inclusivity. Are you guys feeling like, yes, let's get a distribution that is as inclusive as we can? Okay.
Yes, I mean, I hear you that for the purposes of teaching your students effective, proper, ethical surveys, yes, you want to have that focus, but our work is really not in that realm, and I really hear what Linnell's saying about it's really important to make sure that we're getting the voices who aren't heard. That's far more important to me. And, I just want to be sure that we're really reaching folks as much as possible. Because I feel that a Facebook and online survey is going to be so limited, and it's funny that it's called a convenient sample, because I know it was not convenient for Linnell to go around doing that by any stretch of the imagination. But it's so valuable, and I want to make sure that we keep doing that.
Yes, and technically, Linnell, what you did was actually a judgment sample. So Tricare
Okay.
step up from a convenient sample. Because she used her judgment to say this group and this type of people is really valuable to the survey, and I'm going to go find them and help them do it. So Linnell did a judgment sample. Way to go, Linnell. And I actually, one of the things that I noted as I was brainstorming, like, what can we do better this year? Now this doesn't have to like fall on you. We want all of these voices, but I've got a group of 10 students that if we say, hey, part of your job for this class is to go support people in doing this survey. And Linnell, if you would train a couple of them, if I said, okay, we're going to split up the work in this way, and you 4 need to go with Linnell and sit with her while she does one of these surveys with somebody, and then you've got to go out and they can do it in pairs, or they can do it how they're comfortable, or they could watch you do one and then you could watch them do one. But the student could go help people complete the questionnaire. I felt like last year having that input was so valuable. And I don't just turn around this year and say, yay, you did it once, you get to do it again. Like, let's figure out a way to support that input. But I can build that into what we ask the students to do. And I might say, I need half of you to volunteer or to help in this way and half of you to help in that way. And they can sign up for which of those roles they feel more comfortable with. And we could design a way. I feel like doing research, actually talking to people about these issues is so important. And last year I did have the students all do an interview with at least 2 of their own family and friends about human rights and discrimination in Salem, because I wanted them to have the experience of talking. And they came back to class with eye-opening stories. It was, and that was just like, one of them said, I talked to my roommate. One of them talked to a coworker, and she was like, I had no idea that he faced this. Like, I think it was a really good experience for them. But so I could say half of you go interview people in your own circle and half of you go with Linnell and complete this survey. Like, we could design this in a way to build in this ethnographic research, and they actually go out and talk to people and go through the survey. Like, that's awesome. That's great experience. And especially if somebody like you, you've already done it, you're an experienced survey distributor, researcher, supporter, moderator, whatever you want to call it. If you would take a couple students under your wing and train them, and then they could go and in pairs and do a couple more, like, I would love it. Is that something you would be comfortable with?
Completely. I feel like anytime we do something, there's overlap into other things. So to me, it's enabling people to see, now you designed the survey, how does it work in the field? That's always going to be good to know, so you can do better next year and next year. Not because any year is bad, but because we're always learning and there's always things that you wouldn't know.
Right.
But also, when you have people who are beginning to work with populations that are low income and don't look clean and tidy, and might talk to people I can't see, it educates people also, and it takes some of the stigma away. And it's everything. If everything we can do ends up helping even the people who are doing the work to see more about the people that are marginalized, I just feel like that's always a good thing. And there are people who are going out every week to Cascade and Wallace and other places and serving people who are unsheltered, and meeting with people who are low income, and meeting with people who are illiterate, whether they're homeless or not, and being able to, I had no idea how many people are illiterate. I had no clue that I'd be doing this survey and have people saying, I don't understand that word, or I have no idea what you just said to me. And that was eye-opening for me. So I think the more hands-on people can afford to be, and realizing everybody's spread thin and COVID is happening, but the more hands-on people can be, the better, because then you're going to understand the different populations. And to me, I laughed about the judgment call, because I feel like, okay, I get it, but at the same time, my premise just seems like the people who are most likely to be discriminated against are the ones who are marginalized the most. So it almost feels like that's not a judgment, that's just a reality. So
it's a perceptive decision that you made and said, I'm going to act on this and make it happen. So it was great.
We're a couple minutes past 8, and I did want to make sure we addressed kind of the second part of Linnell's comments, which was about the survey design itself.
Yes.
You know, in my field, you know, I'm in communications, and we actually these days are using a software called Readable to evaluate the content that we're putting together for things like grade level, sentence length, word length. Those are the kinds of things that we look at to kind of get to Linnell's point a little bit. And I just wondered, Marianne, if you had some quick thoughts about that, and just a time check for everyone. We are a little bit over. Is everyone cool to hang on for just a couple more minutes? I think this is our only main agenda item. So, okay. Well, take it away, Marianne.
So the typical survey guidance is to target an 8th grade reading level. I do think that the nature of this survey is that it was a long questionnaire and some of the questions were very complex. And so even some of the language, some of the sentence structure, some of the options, I mean, we had these long lists. And I think that we, the students designed it online, and we said, sure, we can print it out and use it in hard copy, but it's very different. Like if you're on a computer and you're just like, okay, there it is, click, then sitting with somebody who has to read each of those options to you. And as we've been talking, one of the things that I've thought about, you know, we want to be able to compare to previous years because there's learning there. But I think that I would really like to take the survey and take a really hard look at what are the most important questions and see if we could shrink it and make some decisions like, hey, this was really nice to know, but these are the pieces that are most important. And these are the questions, you know, for example, we've asked both in 2017 and in 2020, are you aware of the Human Rights Commission? So I think we would want to ask that question, and we would probably word it exactly the same so that we could compare to previous years. But there are some questions we've asked that, you know, we added some last year. We took some wordings from 2017 and shifted things. But I think that to put a set of lenses on to say we want to make this doable in hard copy, especially if we're talking about translating to different languages. If we go from 30 questions to 18 questions, then the translation is easier. We could bring the reading level, make it more accessible. You've talked about the importance of response. And to be honest, the longer the questionnaire, the harder it is to actually do it. And if we could say to people like, this is 12 questions or this is 18 questions, now instead of 10 minutes, it's going to take you 5 minutes on a computer. I think that we can increase the response rate. And so I actually feel like I would prioritize a shorter, simpler questionnaire because I think that's going to get us more response and it's going to be more accessible to more people. So I feel like, Linnell, your comments around the wording, I don't want to put in like a whole bunch of examples that would be really long, but I think to give people like, this is what we're talking about so that, I mean, that's the whole point of communication, right? Is when I use a word, I don't know exactly what that means in your head, but I'm trying to put it down on a piece of paper where we're on the same page. So I think that we have a challenge, but I think it's easier to cut things and to say, these are the pieces that are the most important. And then how can we word those? Like maybe these 3, we word them exactly how we did last year. And then these, we figure out how we can simplify. And these, we add some language, you know, at an 8th grade reading level instead of a master's organizational leadership reading level to make clear what we're asking. And I think that the students and I would be up to that challenge, and we would love, like if we draft it and send it to you guys and say, okay, help us get this right. that would be great. And I think part of it would be for us to do that early in the semester, so in the term, so that we have time to agree on a questionnaire, and then you guys have time to take it to your partner organizations. And we have time for some students to connect with Linnell, that we can go and get the response that we're looking for, because we're not trying to get on a field in 4 days. Okay, so I'm going to work a little bit on a timeline and figure out how we can draft a questionnaire that is shorter. Well, you have a question?
I can almost see taking what you just said and possibly kind of having it be like, here's the survey. It's a anti-discrimination discrimination survey. The city wants to have everybody know that their voice and their needs matter. This is why we're doing it, and maybe have the definition at the end, or a short definition, and then says if you would need examples, go to the last page. And then the examples could be pretty specific, because the people I were talking to so often said no. And then, then they would say, well, this happened one day. I'm like, okay, so that fits. That's exactly what we're talking about. But, to not make the survey longer, but maybe to have just the standard survey in the way that would meet many people who are not living in poverty and illiteracy and survival mode. But for our back page to say, if you need some specific examples and some bullet points of what discrimination would look like. So people would go there if needed, but it's not, it's on the back page, so that people who are helping people who are really just don't even think they're being discriminated against, but they are, for those individuals, you could go to the back page and say, have any of these things or things like this happen to you? So it'd be kind of like an optional page. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to think a little bit about that, because I don't want some people to answer the question without information and some people to answer it with information. And it could be if we give the instructions on the survey and then say, when we say discrimination, this is what we're talking about, and here are a couple of examples. I feel like, it's like online when they say, hey, read all of this and accept the terms. Some people read it and some people don't. But if we give people the option, some people who are like, oh, I'm totally ready. I've got it. I know what they're talking about. They probably will just scan through it and move on. But then somebody who says, oh, I want to make sure I'm on the same page, or I'm not sure that I'm following what they're talking about, they might read it a little bit more carefully. Let me think a little bit about the best way to present the definition and the examples, because I want people answering the questions from the same place. And part of why we put the definition at the beginning was because we wanted people going into it to, like we kind of said, for this survey, when we say discrimination, like this is what we mean, since it can mean different things to different people. Yeah, let me think about that one. We did float the idea of languages besides English and Spanish. Gretchen, I think you're going to follow up on if there are city resources and if we think there's distribution options. So if you feel like Russian or Marshallese or other languages are things to pursue, if you will get back to me, but I will check with my students to see if this term we have any that could help with the Spanish. And it is possible that the students who did it last year, once we say like this survey is finalized, that they might be willing to do it again. They were great. They were really, really good. I did want, before we wrapped up, just to talk a little bit about timing, and I am going to revisit my timing because I want to get you guys the survey as soon as possible. Last year, Tricarico and Mike and Gretchen and Rita all came to class the second night so that the students could meet you guys. We start, I'm a Thursday night at 7:30, all on Zoom this term. And if some of you could be available to join us, that would be Thursday, the 8th of April at 7:30. that would be fantastic. And I can follow up an email with that. I am going to look at the timeline for when we can get you a draft of the questionnaire and when we would want it in field. But we definitely need to be out of field so the students can start analyzing by mid to late May. So the term runs, it's like, well, my class is April 1st to June 10th. But they would be able to give a presentation back to you if it worked for your group Thursday, June 10th, again at 7:30. And I'm happy to email you those dates, but that's kind of the bookend. So if we could have you at the beginning at class and have you at the end at class and then email correspondence throughout, but with a goal to get you a draft of the questionnaire, to get your feedback, and then be ready to get that in field. I mean, honestly, if you come to class on the 8th, that should just be our next task, is to get the questionnaire so that maybe 2 weeks from then we could, like, I just think we want a month in field so that we can finalize this and work with partners and get the responses that we need. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's
Yeah, thank you so much.
excited to meet the next class.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have other questions for me tonight? Do you all have my email?
I don't think I have your email, but Gretchen, can you share contact information?
Sure. Is that okay, Marianne?
Please.
Yeah.
Yes, I am happy for that.
Thanks.
Well, I think if no one else has any other questions for Marianne, thank you so much, Marianne, for coming, and Linnell both. I'm excited to meet the next group of students. The last group was amazing. So I know that it's going to be a real treat for us to be able to work with the students again. Do we have any member remarks or announcements tonight? Well, then I think we can go ahead and adjourn, and we'll look for information coming from Marianne about April the 8th. I hope any of you who are available can join, and looking forward to the next survey. It's going to be great.
Thank you all for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.